It's midnight here in the French capital. The headlines. Hundreds of thousands hit the streets of Sudan, demanding the country's military rulers hand over to a civilian administration. Clashes in Benin as protesters voiced their anger over an election which featured no opposition candidates. And Nicolas Maduro appears defiant among soldiers as the standoff between Venezuela's rival camps continues. The opposition is saying 4 people have now been killed. You're watching live from Paris. Thanks for joining us. We start in Sudan, where hundreds of thousands of protesters have rallied as activists up their efforts to force the ruling military council to hand power to a civilian administration. Among their demands is representation for armed groups who fought the former regime. Long-time leader Omar al-Bashir was ousted by the army on the 11th of April after a wave of demonstrations. He is now behind bars in Khartoum. Our correspondent Julia Steers is in the Sudanese capital and brought us this update.
Residents of Khartoum wove their way through the streets of the capital, making their presence known in the city center before arriving at the military headquarters, now the epicenter of the demonstrations. Tens of thousands streamed in the afternoon to remind the Military Transitional Council that they won't back down from their goal, a civilian-led government. Abu Bakr is among them.
The idea is that it's a parade. When people see us, they decide to join us, and so our numbers increase and it makes us stronger. That's the whole point of starting the protests from various areas.
Responding to the call of the Sudanese Professionals Association, the participants underscore the strength of the people as talks between the military and civilian leaders stall. For Abu Bakr, it's essential that citizens from across the country mobilize together.
Today we're expecting at least 1 million, so that we can deliver a clear message that nothing will hold us back until our main demand is met. Multiple groups will come together from all over. There are already lots of protesters here, and by tonight we hope there will be more than 1 million of us.
Protesters march in shifts to survive the extreme heat before night falls, a strategy to ensure a massive and continued presence. Despite fatigue, they're even more tired of the faces of the old regime.
We'll stay here until this is resolved in a peaceful way and a civilian government is put in charge. This is the demand of everybody in this crowd.
Keenly aware that the holy month of Ramadan begins next week, people here are intent on sorting out political negotiations quickly.
As you can see behind me, protesters are still streaming in to the sit-in site here in central Khartoum. And what's very clear today is that they're sending a strong message to the Transitional Military Council that they're still able to turn out huge numbers in the streets of the capital and across the country in order to keep the pressure on the military to hand over power to a civilian-led government.
Julia Steers in Khartoum. Elsewhere, hundreds of people have taken to the streets in the West African nation of Benin in a second day of protests over an election they say was a sham. Security forces reportedly fired live rounds at demonstrators. France 24's correspondent in the country says at least 2 people have been killed. Violence has sparked warnings from rights groups over a country once regarded as one of the most stable in the region. Claire Rush has details.
Escalating violence between soldiers and protesters. Amateur footage from Benin shows security forces shooting at demonstrators in Cotonou on Thursday, leaving several casualties near the home of former President Thomas Boni Yayi. This as soldiers sought to break up a second day of demonstrations against a controversial parliamentary poll that was held on Sunday without a single opposition candidate.
We'll continue. We're not afraid of prison. Prison is not for dogs, it's for men like us. Democracy is precious to the people of Benin. That's why we're standing up.
New electoral laws passed by President Patrice Talon's government effectively barred opposition parties from running. One of the changes required parties to pay nearly 380,000 euros to field a list. As a result, only 2 parties, both pro-government, contested seats. The electoral reform led many in Benin to boycott the poll, which had a voter turnout of just 23%, according to preliminary results. An unusual figure for the West African state, where turnout hasn't dropped below 50% since its transition to democracy in 1990. Benin has been viewed as one of the most stable democracies in the region, with relatively peaceful elections featuring dozens of parties on the ballot. But rights groups fear that the recent violence and electoral changes may threaten the democratic process in the country.
Elsewhere, Venezuela's opposition says 4 people have now been killed in clashes between the country's rival camps. That after opposition leader Juan Guaido's attempt to topple President Nicolas Maduro by sparking a military defection. Guaido declared himself interim leader back in January and has the backing of more than 50 countries led by the United States. Maduro, who has the support of Russia, appeared flanked by soldiers on Thursday, calling on the army to put down coup plotters. Clement Bonnereau has more.
A meticulously staged call of unity from President Nicolas Maduro, flanked by his defense minister and the head of military operations. The Venezuelan leader thanked the army for resisting what he described as a treacherous plot to topple him.
Something good has come out of this evil, and that's loyalty. The armed forces were not afraid to say no to the traitors, no to those taking part in a coup attempt. Let's not be scared. The time has come to defend our right to peace.
Maduro's call comes 2 days after an uprising led by opposition leader Juan Guaido and backed by some members of the military. The rebel soldiers gathered on a Caracas highway on Tuesday, urging the rest of Venezuela's armed forces to join them and turn on Maduro. But that call went largely unanswered, and the military leadership was quick to pledge support for the president, despite reports of secret talks between the opposition and top Maduro officials.
They came to buy me off with a deceitful, stupid, and ridiculous offer. Those offers are pointless.
Juan Guaido, meanwhile, has urged protesters to stay on the streets, calling on public workers to join in. Hundreds of students marched in Caracas again on Thursday after 2 days of mass demonstrations and clashes that left at least 2 people dead and dozens injured.
Well, meanwhile, the Venezuelan courts issued an arrest warrant for opposition politician Leopoldo Lopez, saying he'd violated an order to remain under house arrest. Lopez left his Caracas home and appeared alongside Juan Guaido as Guaido called on people to rally against Nicolas Maduro. Later on Tuesday, however, he moved into the Spanish ambassador's residence in Caracas. Spain has said it won't hand him over and has asked Venezuela to respect the inviolability of its embassy. Lopez, meanwhile, commenting from that embassy, he had this to say about his time under house arrest.
Over the past 3 weeks, I have organised meetings at my home while being under house arrest. I met commanders, generals, and representatives of all army and police corps. And we all pledged to put an end to the usurpation of power by Nicolas Maduro. And I can tell you that what started on the 30th of April is an irreversible process. Irreversible because the women and the men who serve in the armed forces have finally realised they're not alone. They've realised that they can work together, that together with the Venezuelan people, they can be the driving force in bringing about change for Venezuela.
To the UK now, and Julian Assange's extradition case has been adjourned until the end of the month. That as supporters of the WikiLeaks founder blocked the road outside a London court where he appeared by video link. He said he didn't want to surrender to a potential handover to the United States, where he faces charges of releasing classified information. Assange was dragged from his refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy in the British capital on April the 11th and subsequently sentenced to jail for breaching bail conditions. More Julian has more.
Dozens of people gathered in front of London's Westminster Magistrates Court in support of Julian Assange, who risks extradition to the US. He's accused of conspiring to download classified documents and faces up to 5 years in prison. Appearing via video link from a British prison, the founder of whistleblowing website WikiLeaks said he would not surrender for doing what he called journalism that has won many awards and protected many people. After the hearing, the website's editor insisted the real matter at stake was freedom of expression.
This is about the right to publish truthful information. It's about journalistic freedom. There is no doubt in anybody's mind that this is the case.
WikiLeaks has published hundreds of thousands of classified documents, including military files and diplomatic cables. Assange's legal team is now concerned that if he were to be extradited to the US, he may face further charges and even risk a death sentence.
There is widespread speculation about what the nature of the charges may end up being, if they will add further charges to the extradition request, or indeed add more charges once he's back in the US. And we are concerned about that, so we're watching it very closely.
The extradition case could take many months. In the meantime, Julian Assange is being held in London's Belmarsh prison, where he's serving a 50-week sentence for skipping bail in 2012 and taking refuge in Ecuador's embassy.
You're watching France 24. Up next is The Debate.